Perfect. So welcome to From Seeds to Pollinators. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement. And again, introducing Nelia Dechkova from Oakvillegreen and part of the Green Connections for Adult 55 Plus program. So Oakville Public Library is situated on Treaty 14 and Treaty 22 treaty lands, territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit of the First Nation, and the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Oakville is currently home to many different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Regardless of where we come from, we are all interconnected through the land that we live on, the water that we use, and the air that we breathe. We are committed to continuous learning journey and allyship. We seek to elevate Indigenous voices and lived experiences to cultivate reconciliation in Oakville. So now I will pass over presentation to Anelia, and she can get started here.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Anelia, and I'm the Program Manager for Community and School Engagement with Oakvillegreen Conservation Association. All right, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about plants and seeds and gardening. All right, so let me see what's happening here with my... There we go. Just a couple of words about Oakvillegreen for those of you who are here for the first, hearing about Oakvillegreen for the first time. We are an environmental charity that has been working to create a greener Oakville since 2000. We reconnect people to nature, we protect local nature spaces, increase climate resiliency, increase natural habitat and tree cover, and improve local biodiversity through a variety of educational and stewardship initiatives and events. Green Connections program, and this event is part of the Green Connections program for adults 55 plus. We ran a number of events, monthly virtual chats, forest walks, nature-themed workshops and events in partnership with the public library, Pollinator Garden stewardship, and tree planting events. So we look forward to our spring season. So today's theme is, and I will try really to focus on practical experience of what worked and what didn't work for us when we tried to start these plants from seeds, but just a little bit of feedback so we get a better idea of how pollination and how seeds work and what they go through, what processes they go through in order to be successful in germination. So pollinator, it's one of the most fascinating processes in the natural world, just because it involves the transfer of pollen from the male parts to the female parts of the same or another plant. It is very complex, but it is actually, it forms a mutualistic relationship in which each, the plants and pollinator animals, they benefit from one another. So did you know that over 75% of the world's flowering plants and about 35% of the world's food crops depend on animal pollinators to reproduce? Just because some flowers are able to self-pollinate using just the wind or water, or others just need the help of our pollinator animals. So pollinator plants, when I refer to a pollinator plant, I mean plants that actually serve as a food source for pollinator animal species. They provide a habitat for insects, birds, and other wildlife, and they are host plants for butterfly and moth larvae. And some of them are actually called keystone pollinator species. And these are very special plants. They fill a critical niche in the ecosystem, which no other species can replace. So their importance is out of proportion to how many other species there are in the ecosystem. They're always native to the environment, which means that they have evolved here in the area. And pollinator keystone plants, they support the highest number of caterpillar food webs. I'll just give a few examples and happy to send and share more information. But some examples specifically for our area of keystone pollinator species are asters, goldenrods, native sunflowers, Joe Pye wheat, wild blueberry, and from the tree species, oaks, black cherry, willows, maples, birches. And when we talk about pollinator animal species, we are always referring to the bees and butterflies, but there are a lot of other animal species that actually are pollinators, such as sparrows and small birds and ants and sometimes spiders and flies and even wasps. So why native plants? They grow and occur naturally in the area where they have evolved. So they provide, as I mentioned, they provide the vital food and habitat for insects, birds. So overall, they increase biodiversity. They thrive better in local soils and climate conditions, so they're more resilient. So therefore, they fight climate change and they're beautiful. Most of these images are taken in my front yard or backyard, and it's been a beautiful journey just to watch and observe the transformation. It's never too late. You can always start small and don't be afraid to start transforming your garden into a native habitat. So it is time that we think of that winter sowing and start our plants from seeds. If we were lucky to have some native seeds or we collected some in the fall, it is actually still not too late. I did mine a few weeks ago, but it's still not too late to start actually to put these seeds into action. So a few words about seed dormancy. This is actually an adaptation that prevents the seeds from germinating when conditions would not favor survival. Do all of the seeds go into dormancy? Very hard to say. It is very complex, and the periods depends on the climate and the conditions. But the plants that I will be focusing on, just because they're native, they're perennials, they do go into dormancy, and we live in an environment and climate that has the cold winter season. So dormancy, there are a few types of dormancy. Seeds are underdeveloped, so they need some time to mature. Seeds are protected by seed coat. So normally in the wild, sometimes that coat would be actually broken by animals' digestive, so by their digestive enzymes. So sometimes just by water. If what we are trying to do, we are actually trying to mimic nature. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but the other type of dormancy is germination inhibiting hormones. So it's called physiological dormancy. The idea for us, we have these seeds, we need to actually trick them that they're going through these processes. So when it is the right time, the right environment for these seeds to come out of dormancy and to start growing. So this is called seed stratification. So it is a general term that refers to a range of processes used to simulate natural conditions. Normally it's temperature and moisture, but it is more complex than that for some species, and seeds required before germination occur. So different seeds require different ways and time periods of stratification, but generally speaking, between at least 4 weeks to 12 weeks of that stratification. So once again, we are trying to trick these seeds that they're actually, they've never been collected, they've never been into our homes. So basically they've been outside, and we're trying to mimic that process that they're going through, hot and cold, moist and dry, until the seed decides, well, it is the right time now, it's warming up in the spring, it's moist, I've been through these processes, I'm coming out of dormancy, so it is safe for me to start germinating. I will go step by step, and at the end of my presentation, I will just talk about the species, the plant species that I found that are successful, and with the methods that I will describe right now. But when we talk about winter sowing, again, the main goal is just to have these seeds be stratified, so to go through these different conditions and be able to germinate when it starts warming up. I picked the swamp milkweed seeds because I've been always successful out of all kinds of milkweed seeds. I find personally that swamp milkweed seeds always work great for me. If you're the ones to collect your seeds yourself in the fall, we can do another talk about seed collection, but it is very important that we really wait until they're mature, so we don't actually pick up the seed pods when they're still green and the seeds are still not mature, so they are not going to be viable. So step one, we prepare the seeds and ensure they're not molded or empty. Or sometimes we cannot really tell if they're empty, but this is why we actually put more seeds. So just to ensure that we have some that are not. Some seeds with harder shells require pre-soaking. Not in this case, I don't pre-soak milkweed seeds. For example, the New Jersey tea seeds, when they're harder shells, they do need pre-soaking for at least 24 hours. Step two, I normally use some containers that I have available. I reuse them, which is really nice. They need to be sort of transparent, so just to allow daylight to go through. So any larger or smaller containers that you may have, just cut them in the middle and drill holes on the bottom. Next step, add some moist seed starting soil mix to the containers and fill them up a bit below the bottom half. I don't necessarily use a specific starting soil mix, sometimes just whatever soil, organic soil, or garden soil I have left from the previous season. I use that soil and I have no issues. I personally find with the seed starting mixes that they sell that it is so much easier to dry out. So here I think I just used a regular garden or triple mix, whatever I had. Step 4, so we sow the seeds and lightly cover with soil and ensure the soil is moist. I normally would even water one more time, even if the soil was previously moist. I just make sure that it's all wet before I tape the containers and label them. So that was from last year, the image. And I have a few of these outside with the swamp milkweed and with a number of other species. But it is always great to label because we tend to forget. And once we are ready with that, we leave the tops open and we place outside in a location that is protected from strong winds so they don't fall. Seeds will break dormancy and germinate once temperatures rise up in the spring. Again, it's the end of February, so we still have some time for these colder minus temperatures, so it's not too late to do that. And step 7, we open up the top part to allow more light after sprouting and keep soil moist. It's actually really cool to like keep peeking to the hole, and it's so exciting when you see these green seedlings coming out. Once they have the green growth, they need the sunlight just to make, they need the sun to make their own food and to start growing. So I normally allow them a little time before I start thinning them out. I love putting them, I know it's more work, but I love putting them into separate pots if possible, or just even in a larger pot, but just to allow them more space. But we need to have at least one set or more of true leaves. So it's just a bigger, not like the tiny first leaves, but as you can see on the first picture. So this is when it is safe even to transfer in the garden. Of course, if you wait another month, probably you would see them sprouting in May. And if you wait a few more weeks, there would be stronger and it would be a higher chance for these plants to survive when you transfer them into your garden. Here, I believe I had some asters and the swamp milkweed from one container like that. It was a 1 gallon container. I had over, I don't know, I don't even remember, but it was more than 60 little seedlings. So I had to give away a lot of them. So some other ideas for outdoor sowing, if you really would like to try a different seed, so you don't have just one container with swamp milkweeds and you would like to just label, I use that method with the labeling, the individual little pots. It is, again, very hard to keep moist. I found that they dry out much faster rather than in the larger container. And I had a mixed success with these, I would say 50-50, and I had different species too. So it's kind of hard to compare, but I generally found out that they dry out faster, so it is harder for the seeds to keep moist and germinate successfully. But I've seen people doing that. Another method, if you would like to sow directly or into pots again, sowing directly is great. This is what nature would normally do it. Again, once again, we don't know what happens with the weeds coming out. Sometimes it's harder to locate the seedling. So I generally prefer just to have the larger container and then just to transfer the seedling. Seed balls are amazing. They're made of clay, compost, and native seeds, and they can be dispersed at any time of the year. If the seeds are not stratified, if they were kept somewhere warm, they did not go through these warm, moist, cold, freezing, thawing cycles, these seeds may not sprout if we disperse the seed balls in the spring. But if we have the seed balls ready now or in the fall, even if we disperse, if they're not stratified, they may even germinate the following spring. So they are a great way to plant native seeds, but it is more to me personally just to fill in space. We use them with Oakvillegreen's Pollinator Gardens, the clay and the soil encase the seeds. The larger seeds are placed more towards the center, and the smaller seeds can be just placed a little bit closer to the surface. So they're an amazing way to plant native plants. We do have some individually packaged seed ball making kits that contain clay, soil, and seeds. So if you're interested, email us at programs@oakvillegreen.org, and we would be happy to arrange a pickup. We have a variety of different seeds, so these are, again, a great way. Or if you would like just to help us make the seed balls, we would be happy to disperse them in our pollinator patches later on. Other ideas, a lot of people use the refrigerator method. So basically we have paper towels or just directly in Ziploc bags. I've tried even in little pots, and once you put the seeds into the soil mix and label, you place in the refrigerator and keep for at least 30 days. Very important that you check on the seeds for mold or for early sprouting. If seeds start to sprout, we need to remove from the fridge immediately and plant in pots indoors until it is time to transfer outside. And we have one more factor here. We need to harden the seedlings before transferring outside, which means that we need to take them outside for shorter periods of time before they're ready to go into the garden. I find this method more labor intensive, way more, and you need the indoor space just to grow these small seedlings. After that, I find the seedlings, they're a little bit weaker, so the hardening is always tricky. And I've learned my lessons with my vegetable seedlings, but Again, I've done the refrigerator method. I've had some partial success with butterfly milkweed. However, I find that direct sowing outside is the way better. Some species that I would like to point out and that are great just to grow from seed. Again, we only have that one time to give it a try with gardening per year. So we always love it when they're successfully growing, and especially in this case when we are creating a habitat and we are providing a food source and shelter for so many beneficial insects. We would love these plants to be successful. Some plants that grow well from seed, I put here butterfly milkweed and swamp milkweed. Common milkweed would grow from seeds as well. Just a lot of people would prefer, would opt for these types of milkweed just because they don't spread out as much as the common milkweed, or they're more suitable, especially the butterfly milkweed is more suitable for smaller backyards and for smaller gardens. They're all beautiful. I personally find swamp milkweed to be a pollinator magnet, not just for the monarch butterfly, but just for so many other pollinators. So it is a very, very busy plant, and very likely that they would bloom in the first season, which is not common for so many of the other plants, that they need one growing season at least, and after that they start flowering. Another, again, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are aware that the milkweed is a host plant for the monarch butterfly, and they're beautiful, beautiful plants, all three species that are native here, the butterfly, the swamp, and the common. The pearly everlasting, it is another plant that I discovered sort of recently. It is a short plant, and it is a very dry tolerant, easy to grow from seeds. I had a number of seedlings last year. It can actually, you can put it on edges. I have it in a very compromised area with very poor soil, and it doesn't get any rain, just by the front entrance. They're still flowering. They're just very, very resilient plants. Highly recommend. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful when they're dry. Even right now, you can see some dry seed heads. They're just lovely plants. Blue lobelia, it is a moisture-loving plant, but I find it easy to grow and start from seed. Easier to grow even in medium moisture. Purple coneflower, again, this plant even has the tendency to release some chemicals just to make the area more suitable for its own growth. It's a special way of some plants just to create more space for their own species. So you would find that with these plants, I would say all plants are great to plant in patches rather than single plants. But with this one, you would find that they would reseed themselves on their own. So you would find a lot of little seedlings around the mother plant in the springtime. So I have the coneflower here, I believe, the gray-headed coneflower. Again, they produce a lot of seeds too, so very easy to collect the seeds, very easy to easier to start the plants from seed. They do grow tall, so it is very important just to make sure that they have some support, or again, they're being grown in patches, in clusters. Other species, goldenrods, and again, I know the Canada goldenrod, it may be seen as a little bit of a bully along with some of the asters because they spread out a lot and take over a lot of space, but they're one of the keystone species, asters and goldenrods. So they're very important species to have in our garden. They're okay to start now, and they can be grown from seed. Joe pie wheat, I love that species. It does resemble a little bit the swamp milkweed, but it is a different aroma, and it is really a favorite for many of the pollinator species in my yard. A hard-leaved aster, I put hard-leaved aster. You can start from seeds, the New England aster or the other types of asters. Once again, I picked the hard-leaved aster just because it's one of the smaller varieties. Very, very easy, very successfully germinating. I gave away a lot of these plants last year. So, and they're wonderful. They have smaller flowers, but they're beautiful. They're very pretty, and they provide a lot of food for these late season food for pollinators. So I have, I have the harebell. So this is another small plant flower, so it doesn't grow too tall. It is a good plant to put in a smaller pollinator garden. It's not going to take too much space. It lasts, the blooms last for a long time. So this is a wonderful plant to have. Wild bergamot, it would need space because if you try to condense a lot of the wild bergamots, they're prone to mildew, so they do need their space and their sun. But they're actually great companion plant for tomatoes and peppers. And they have very unique tubular petals that attracts not just bees and butterflies, but also hummingbirds. Some people direct sow wild bergamot directly into the soil, along with the purple coneflower. They're just a bit easier to germinate and to sprout. I haven't tried direct sowing the wild bergamot. So these species here are the ones that I haven't been successful, or they're very slow growing. For example, the cardinal flower, it did sprout, it did germinate the seeds, but after that, the plants took forever to be able to be transplanted into the garden. I believe I transplanted them in the fall, and they were still very tiny. Generally, the cardinal flower is a slowly growing plant, so we have to be very patient, but it is absolutely worth it because it is a beautiful flower and with the brilliant red color. So it was worth the wait. Same with wild columbine. It is possible to start from seed, but then the seedlings are very gentle, very small. So you need to wait. You need to be a little bit patient before you transplant to the garden, so they're more successful. Foxglove beer tongue, I haven't done it personally. I've heard that it is from fellow plant fellows here in the area, that it is not difficult to start from seed. New Jersey tea, I was not successful. I tried a different method with the pre-soaking this year. So I hope that I would have the New Jersey tea is a small shrub, but it does provide early blooms, which is amazing because we always striving to have spring, summer, and fall blooms for the pollinators. So they have food, seasons. Nodding onions, another plant that I have not tried to grow from seed. Oh, actually it did grow once, but it does take time for the plant, for the seedling to just, so it would require most likely maintaining and watering in a pot and transferring probably in early fall. And the coreopsis, this is another plant that you can try, but I've had mixed success with germinating the coreopsis. So lots of ideas. These are just some plants that we have tried and what worked and didn't work. Again, you can start some native grasses from seeds, such as the little blue stem or some some sedges. Not experienced in growing grasses from seeds, but it is possible. The number one thing is always to be able to do a little bit of research of what kind of stratification they require. How, even by looking at the seeds, sometimes you can tell if they have that hard shell and if they need to be pre-soaked, sometimes even like mechanical, like physical scratching and removing a part of the shell is required. So when I talk about plants, I just wanted to mention that just native plants, they have the unique power of connecting people with the natural world and just bringing a better understanding of how ecological balance is dependent on all of us as living species. So it is time that we look not only at aesthetics and how beautiful and how perfectly organized a garden is, but how we are contributing and how we are making a difference by peacefully and collaboratively coexist with all living things in the area. Designing, no matter how big, a pollinator garden is a huge contribution. And I use my pollinator garden just to maintain that habitat, but also to inspire others and to inspire like a sense of wonder, because knowledge generally promotes conservation and stewardship. So it is an amazing thing to observe and to look after. We do have a native plant sale with Oakvillegreen. It will be online. We're hoping that it will launch the first week of March. Since 2015, this sale has added more than 3,000 native trees, shrubs, and plants to Oakville gardens. And in 2021 alone, this sale contributed to 2,480 square feet of pollinator-friendly habitat. So the sale runs March through April with pickup in early May. So feel free to keep an eye on our website. We source the plants from local suppliers. So we were very, very excited to be able to launch the plant sale very soon. So I would like to leave some time for questions, because I can just talk about many other things and plants, but I would love to hear your questions and your experiences with winter sowing and with native plants, and if you've had any challenges. So feel free just to type your questions in the chat or just to unmute yourself. And again, this is on the left with the butterfly. It is a small patch that I started, and I made a lot of mistakes just trying to squeeze in as many as possible plants at the start, and then realizing that actually not 20 different species in that little space would make more sense rather than having these clusters. So by observing how the pollinators would try and feed from one plant and go to the other, and how some of these host plants would actually provide, if you have 5 or 7 or 10 of them, would be so much more beneficial. But you learn, and this is I still have some plants that are not native, they're pollinator friendly. I kind of feel to me it is very hard to remove plants, but this is just the first garden the first patch that I started. On the right hand side, it is one of my newer front yard patches, and that bee is really, really busy feeding on the gray-headed coneflower. Feel free, if you're in the around in the area of Glen Abbey, in front of Glen Abbey Community Center, we maintain a pollinator garden. We do maintain another one at Oak Park by Wellspring Center, and a third one at Kingsford Gardens by the community vegetable lots there on the other side. So it's been a wonderful experience and a great learning journey for Oakvillegreen, and thanks to lots of volunteers, we are able to, and of course, like the knowledge of local experts, we are able to create habitats. And once again, it is very important that we provide these corridors for pollinators, just not very isolated individual spots. So the more we plant in our yards, the better. So pollinators have these corridors just to move from one to the other.
Okay, thank you so much, Nelia. And thank you for everyone to coming today and hopefully learning a lot more about pollinators. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure.